Good morning, good morning, good morning, San Bernardino, Riverside, the Inland Empire, Rancho Cucamonga, and Loma Linda, California, and good afternoon and good evening to those listening to us on the live stream link. This is the Kathleen Wells Show, and I'm Kathleen, and last Monday we officially celebrated Martin Luther King Day, and I thought how fitting, how appropriate to have as my guest today internationally acclaimed sculptor Ed Dwight. Mr. Dwight was initially approached to sculpt the Martin Luther King Memorial in Washington, D.C. But before I bring on Mr. Dwight, let me give out the call-in number because I'd like listeners to call in at the half hour with their comments and questions. So that call-in number is it's a toll-free number, 1-888-909-1050. So let me tell you a little bit about Mr. Dwight, Mr. Ed Dwight, before I bring him on. He was the first his first artistic endeavor, began with a commission to create a sculpture of Colorado's first black lieutenant governor, George Brown, in 1974. And from this first endeavor, he was commissioned by the Colorado Sentinel Commission to create a series of bronzes entitled Black Frontier in the American West. This series depicted the contribution of African Americans to the opening of the West. After the success of his Black Frontier Spirit Series exhibit, Ed began to explore the most significant black contribution to the culture of America, the history of jazz, which exhibited in his jazz series an American art form. This series depicts the evolution of jazz music from its roots in Africa to the contemporary superstars of the jazz era. To date, Ed Dwight has created over 120 memorials, monuments, and public art installation, as well as some 18,000, gallery-level sculptures. Included is the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial installed in Denver, Colorado. Other major installations underway include the National Monument to Cotton Picking and Sharecropping. This historical monument will include a museum and research center and be installed in the historic town of Mound Bayou, Mississippi, on the Mississippi Delta. Another installment is the John Hope Franklin Memorial in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Also a tribute to the destruction of the black town of Greenwood, Oklahoma in the 1921 Tulsa race riot, where hundreds of blacks were killed and the entire town burned to the ground. Other installments are a memorial to Rosa Parks for the city of Grand Rapids, Michigan, the first sculpture of both Dr. Martin Luther King and Scoretta Scott King for Allentown, Pennsylvania, a second memorial to Dr. Benjamin Mays near the city of Charleston, a monument to the great activist Denmark Vesey for the city of Charleston, South Carolina, and four major monuments include the first binational monument dedicated to the International Underground Railroad movement in Detroit, Michigan, and in Windsor, Canada, and also the African American History Monument on the Capitol grounds in Columbia, South Carolina, and a memorial to George Washington Williams, the first black legislator in the state of Ohio, installed in the state capitol in Columbus, Ohio. So the question is, who better to sculpt the memorial to Dr. Martin Luther King in Washington, D.C. than Ed Dwight? That is the question. So thank you, Ed, for joining me this morning.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me aboard.
So my question to you is that, let's see, the memorial for Martin Luther King was dedicated on October 16th. You were initially approached to sculpt that memorial. What happened?
Well, you have to go back to to the beginnings of it. I did submit a proposal for the original King, and there were 900 sculptors and sculpture teams, architects from around the world that had sent proposals in, and I was not selected in that group because they really, at the time, weren't really looking for a representational image of King. They were looking for something a little bit more abstract. Roma Design Group out of San Francisco was selected, and the original image, of the memorial, Dr. King's image was not included in it. It was just three mountains, taken from a speech that he made about the mountain of despair where they emerge the stone of hope where they emerged from a mountain of despair. And so it was what they had done. There were two huge mountains, and they had metaphorically cut the middle of the mountain of despair out and slid it out away from the mountain of despair and called that the stone of hope. And that was the original design, period. And then it was going to be have a lot of King's quotations around it. It wasn't until later that they decided to add an image of King as this thing kind of moved along, and we don't have enough time to go through all the little details of how that happened. Mm-hmm. But as soon as that happened, they approached me, came to Colorado, and sat down with me and offered me the task of the sculpture of record for the memorial, and I started working on it.
And you created a model, and that model was approved by the Fine Arts Commission, which was overseeing the project. Is that correct? That's correct.
And so the only thing, the only issue at hand was that I don't carve stone, and we had a discussion about doing it in bronze, but that was immediately dismissed because they didn't want to mix materials there. Because my idea was to do a bronze sculpture of him, and it says embedded in the granite, and that was an option. Then I could control that process through, because I have a large foundry, I could do that myself. But they opted to go ahead and just carve the stone, which is not a problem. And that's normally what's done is that I would design it, and we would go find somebody that carved stone to enlarge it for me. And so that's how this thing was. That's how the Chinese sculptor came into play. We were out looking for somebody to carve the stone, to take my model and enlarge it. And that wasn't my first when we went to find this Chinese guy. And we really didn't go there. Well, at least I didn't go there looking for the Chinese guy. There's some things that have come up that looks like that the Chinese guy was a plant there.
What do you mean a plant?
Well, just the way the thing was staged. There was a sculpture conference in St. Paul, Minnesota, and we were going to go there to interview sculptors, and there were 10 sculptors from around the world there, and we were just going to go find one, including America, Africa, Switzerland, Germany, Japan, China. So there were 10 from 10 different countries around the world. And they seemed to, the three of us, me, Ed Jackson, the project architect, and another gentleman that's an architect from Bulgaria who is, working with Ed, and myself, and the three of us went to St. Paul to select a sculptor. And I tried to get them to talk to the sculptor from Nigeria, because from just an optical point of view, it would be totally appropriate to have an African sculptor enlarge this thing. I mean, it would be phenomenal, in my opinion.
The issue is a matter of having enough rock. I mean, why are we even looking at an international sculptor when Martin Luther King is an American hero? Why are we going international?
Well, the net of the whole story was, and I don't want to get to the end of the story before the end of the story, but the problem was, here's what you got to consider. You had a group of gentlemen, and I have respect for all of these guys because they were they were prominent people in the Alpha fraternity, and not one of these guys had ever done this before. And they went through 4 or 5 directors before they got to the guys that ended up leading this thing. because guys, they were well over their heads, so they kept going up there to Washington and leaving because they had no idea what the hell they were doing.
Uh-huh.
And so, but that didn't change much. But the original deal was, looking at it from the outside, you had to be an alpha to be involved in this. And that's what they were trying to do, whether it was purposeful, but if from the outside looking in, everybody in the inner group were all alpha men, okay?
Oh, so we're talking about the black fraternity Alpha Phi Alpha, is that correct?
Yeah, exactly, because they had the responsibility to put this project together and get it financed and put it up, okay? And so my fault going into this thing was that I wasn't an alpha. Heck of a thing to say. But the issue is these guys didn't have any idea what they were doing. I'll just make a long story short. They had never done it before, and they were learning as they were going along. And the thing got so complicated. What I mean by complicated, I gave them a path to how this is normally done in the country here, okay? And I instead of going to find a sculptor to do this thing, there are people, like there's a company in Philadelphia that has the ability to do this mechanically with a computer, and you get it perfectly, exactly like you want it, okay? And it's right down the road. The whole thing would have been very simple. They wouldn't have had all this cost coming from shipping pieces of granite from China and all that kind of stuff to get over here, but they turned that down. And as far as the granite itself was concerned, the state of Vermont offered to give them the granite for free. All they wanted was the labor for the guys to carve the stuff and move the stuff to Washington. They turned that down. Further optics, the idea of using Georgia granite because Dr. King was from Georgia. Well, how cool that would be to use Georgia granite, and to put on because it was that's where Dr. King was born. So the optics were terrible in the whole deal. And so they ended up choosing this Chinese guy, and much to my chagrin, I was involved in that. But much to my chagrin, they thought it appropriate, and it seems like, from what I can gather, somebody told these guys that there was a possibility that if they chose this Chinese guy, that the Chinese government was going to give them some $25 million toward the project. And there were some other rumblings around about him being the greatest artist in China, and having him work for a black sculptor wasn't going to be well taken by the Chinese government. So there's all kind of ramifications to this story, but they opted to use this Chinese guy and the reason why, the bottom line on this thing was they needed somebody to just take over the project and relieve them of any responsibility. And so the Chinese government ended up getting deeply involved in this thing. And so now they got the Chinese artists, you got the Chinese government involved, and for them it was a turnkey deal. So when you talk about the optics of having a black sculptor or putting people to job, giving people work here in America or having it done in America, having it made in America, all that stuff fell on deaf ears because it would have been harder for them to do it, that way.
Yeah, so the bottom line is that the statue of the memorial of one of America's greatest heroes, Martin Luther King, the work to do that was outsourced to China. That's the bottom line.
That's basically the bottom line, and the larger difficulty, because I was still involved even after because I was led to believe for a time that I was still the sculptor of record, because I was going back and forth to Washington. The Chinese sculptor ended up here in my studio, okay, because we had the bond and stuff, so he and I became quite close. I have all of his stuff, and he's got all my portfolios and all my kind of stuff. I'm the one that gave him all of the images of Dr. King. I gave him 100 images of Dr. King, 3 of my best books on King, 2 DVDs on King so he could see King walk and make speeches, and so he could learn his anatomy from that. And I was supposed to be going over there, and he was supposed to be working for me. And that's how the whole thing operated for quite a time. And months have gone when I did not know, and I was going back and forth to Washington, D.C., these guys had not told me that before the Chinese guy left the country here, they had signed a contract and given this sculpture project to him. They didn't bother to tell me that. And so I'm still operating as if I'm the sculptor of record. And so, so I wrote the people up there a letter, and say, what is going on? Because I was in Washington to pick the quotes that you see that they're having difficulty with now with the memorial. There were several of us in the room, and at the end of that session, we were there for 8 hours choosing quotes. At the end of that, I was supposed to go to China with them in October the 22nd, 2006. I was supposed to go to China with them. 2 days before I was getting ready to leave for China, I got an email saying that don't come this time because all we're going to do is pick granite, and you don't care about that, and we're not going to be doing anything else. So we'll be going over there twice a month. So as soon as we get back, yada yada yada. But they had lied to me because what had happened was they had already hired this guy. Went over there. He had already worked. They had given him enough money in advance, and I had given him the images. When they came back from China on that first trip, they came back here with an image of Dr. King made by this Chinese gentleman that looked like a gorilla. And so, at the end of the meeting, when in Washington, they pull out the pictures to show, and that's when I learned that they had lied to me, that they had gone to China, they had hired the guy, and they had 4 or 5 books of pictures of him working on this thing. And then the end result was this hostile-looking, gorilla-looking man that was supposed to be Dr. King with these deep-set eyes and the chin that stuck out like a gorilla.
The thing that I'd like to focus on is the fact that at a time when we're being told by the president, I think President Obama gave a joint session, delivered a joint session job speech.
Right.
On September 2nd last year. At a time when we do not have jobs in America, we are losing jobs at an alarming rate. And in fact, President Obama specifically said in that speech that he didn't want buildings and bridges built in China.
Right,
there are millions of jobless Americans, and if Martin Luther King was about anything, it was about jobs and justice. Well, so that's what I really want to focus on. Is why. I totally agree with you, but Kathleen, what you have to understand is that there was so much arrogance associated with this entire project. I mean, arrogance from we know what we're doing, and we don't care really about. As a matter of fact, I had so many things said up there that I was disturbed because as much black art as I've done, as many memorials as I've done. I grew up in white schools, and I had no sensitivity about black progress or black anything, okay? I didn't know who Harriet Tubman was until I was 42 years old. So I'm very sensitive, because since I learned all this stuff, I'm very sensitive to the black community, what the shortfall is in the black community, what's needed in the black community in the way of confidence and support and self-support among our black folks, and that's what Dr. King was all about. I was saying those words in this environment, and I was told, screw it, we don't care about that. And so then I was told that by a black fraternity.
Yes. That
Alpha Phi Alpha.
That was the atmosphere. I swear to God, that was the atmosphere. I'd leave Washington D.C. just with my heart just sunk down into my stomach, so disgusted with these gentlemen who were supposed to be there to promulgate Dr. King's message, to formulate a system that would allow us black people. This is the first opportunity we would have all had to show the world something to let the world know that Dr. King's work was well received, and they trashed that and threw it out the window, and we learned nothing about or from Dr. King. All we knew about was there was a bunch of guys that, well, screw the black folks. We don't care what all of this stuff about all of these principles and stuff like that. We're going to do what we want to do.
But the principles matter. So we're going to take a break, and let me give out the call-in number. I hope someone calls in. Some of my listeners call in with comments and questions for Ed Dwight. So we were just talking about, I'm speaking with Ed Dwight, the sculptor, who was initially contacted by the fraternity Alpha Phi Alpha, which took on the responsibility of finding someone to sculpt the memorial. That's who we're speaking with now. And the call-in number is toll-free number, 1-888-909-1050. So listeners, call in and give me your comments and questions, because I want to hear your thoughts on this issue. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This is the Kathleen Wells Show. I'm Kathleen, and I'm honored to have the opportunity to speak with Ed Dwight, who is a sculptor who initially was contacted by the people overseeing the Martin Luther King Memorial in Washington, D.C. He was initially approached by them to do the sculpture, but it didn't work out that way. So you were telling us, Ed, how it did work out, and bottom line is that it worked out that the project was outsourced to China,
yes,
to the Chinese.
Yes.
And this is disappointing, because I think one of the things that Dr. King stood for was that black Americans and white Americans working together. Wouldn't that be working together to do this statue? Wouldn't that be such a fantastic thing for those working on the statue together, all Americans working on that statue together, being able to tell their grandkids that I worked on the Dr. King statue in Washington, D.C.? The symbolism of that is great, right?
Yeah, totally. And I wasn't so hot. I mean, I didn't even think about this idea of the black sculptor idea and the black artist idea. They were having some difficulty prior to my coming on board with dealing with other black subcontractors and other black contributors, black artists. And it seemed that once they announced it, they were just inundated with every black sculptor, every black artist, and that this should be a 100% black deal and all that kind of stuff. I was of the opinion, what you just said about the sharing of it being a black and white joint effort. However, my feelings grew to why couldn't we assemble, since it was the first memorial dedicated to an African American on the mall? This is the first time that we have had an opportunity to do something, excuse me, nationally significant. And why couldn't, however, we take and pull the best of the black professionals, whether it's in art or architecture or construction, and just as a showcase, if you will, to let the world know that what Dr. King was all about, and he was very deeply into education, he was like progress and equality and justice, all those metaphors that are the words that you use to describe the black struggle in America. Why couldn't we assemble a group of people to show the whole world that Dr. King, we were all the result of what Dr. King was about. And so that was my theory about the whole thing, and I wasn't pushing for that one way or the other.
That the civil rights movement was not for naught.
Yeah,
it was not just, this futile, wasteless effort.
Right.
And we hear the stats. We know the stats of the rate of joblessness in black and brown communities.
Right.
We know the stats of the rate of the income disparity between blacks and whites. So we can make an argument for it should have been definitely people of color, definitely black folks working on it. If not them, definitely Americans of all colors, right? But why outsource to China? You see, this is, and even President Obama just said, let's not outsource everything to China. And yet, here we have our American hero outsource his project outsourced to China. I mean, it's very disappointing to me.
Well, they kept using Dr. King's language, which many white people of ill will have used against us.
Yes, I know. They always use the one, be content of character.
They
use that one like nobody's business, right?
You stole it because they've used that argument against affirmative action.
Right.
They've used that argument against every single small amount of progress available to us.
Right.
And they said that's a reason for us not doing anything for you guys, because it's not about color, it's about the content of character.
Listen, that's the only quote they know of King's. They take it out of context. I mean, there were a lot more other things that he said. You got to look at the whole picture, the entire man. You can't take one quote and that's what the man stood for. I think it's a little more complicated than that.
Well, right? I know, but to have the leaders up there use that
themselves,
to justify,
right?
because talking about Dr. King was a man of the world. And the fact that when the Fine Arts Commission had approved my design, when the Chinese guy brought his design, and the discussion was how far out from the stone do you pull Dr. King, where you start losing the effect of him, and so I gave him 3 designs. And my design was built into the rock so that you barely saw an image of King. In other words, you looked up and you saw, my God, there's Dr. King there.
Uh-huh.
And it was a very spiritual, not in your face. It was a very spiritual, I'm here watching over you, because he was a man of God.
Uh-huh.
So I wanted to, he's gone, but yet he's still with us.
Uh-huh. And
so you bring him just a tiny bit out of the stone. I gave them the 3 designs that buried totally into the stone, emerging from the stone a little bit, and then full away from the stone, And so everybody that had evaluated it, the Fine Arts Commission looked at that, and that's it. That's it. When they took the Chinese guy's thing and brought him back to the Fine Arts Commission, I have the writing, I have the decision, and they turned it down.
Uh-huh.
Says go back and fix it, because it looks like communist, and you use every word, this communist dictator.
I think it does have a flavor of Chairman Mao to me, when I look at it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it has that same feel to it.
But we had this discussion about whether you should, and so the more I wanted it back in, the more the principles that they wanted it out, because, it was, it was like President Obama. Everything President Obama wants to do, the larger community is against it, just because he's a black president. Okay, and that the culture of the whole system up there degenerated to that real quickly. That if Dwight wants it, we're going to go against everything Dwight wants.
Right.
Whatever Dwight wants.
Well, so what do you say to critics that say, "Oh, well, you just lost a competition"? What is your response to people who say that?
Well, Bill Gray, they hired Bill Gray, who was a friend of, he's an ex-friend of mine now, Congressman Gray, that owns 5 of my sculptures. And this guy got on the radio up in the air and told me what you just said. Dwight is just stuck to sour grapes. He needs to come to grips with, he lost the competition. And, and my issue with the whole thing was there was no competition. But to do the Dr. King statue, there was no competition. But they put out a lie to the press that they had held a competition with 500 artists responding, and I lost. And they said that I came in 60th or some nonsense like that.
Uh-huh.
There was no competition. It was I was involved in it.
Uh-huh.
It was a straight deal, and there's evidence that's barely coming to the surface that when the Chinese guy came over here, because there was some previous things going on with some of the Alpha brothers in China. There's a gentleman at Stanford University that works in the history department. He happens also to be the gentleman that's in charge of the Dr. King papers.
Uh-huh.
He hired on with the winning team as a consultant, sat down and wrote all of the requirements to submit the competition and gave it to Roma Design Group. So therefore, they answered all the questions. He was a consultant. They paid consultant to the Roma Design Group. Now, don't you find it kind of weird that the Roma Design Group, out of 900 proposals, automatically wins this competition?
Uh-huh.
Very, very fascinating. But This same guy wrote a play, a children's play on Dr. King. He apparently was having difficulty selling it over here, so somebody got him into China and told him that, hey, if you take this to China, they can translate this thing, and the Chinese government would would accept it. Well, that's what happened. So he's over there in China with this children's play running around China. Okay, so we find it kind of strange, the people that I've been working with, because I'm writing a book about this, by the way. And when this Chinese guy came here, when we go to St. Paul, they zero straight into the Chinese guy and wouldn't talk to anybody else.
So out of the $125 million was spent on this project. Is that the right figure?
Well, it's a lot more than that, but we'll settle with $120 million.
That's the sort of like the official number that they're giving.
Right.
So let's say $125 million was spent on the project for the memorial of Dr. Martin Luther King.
Right.
And none of that money was spent employing American workers.
To add insult to injury, to expand on your theory, they brought the entire Chinese construction crew from China over here, put them up in a motel, bought out the whole motel for 2 or 3 months, the whole group of people from China to construct that memorial. And the unions in D.C., in Maryland, and Virginia were freaked because they were not able to work on that project. I mean, this is just, it was adding insult to injury. And of course, there were questions, there was a lot of controversy in the D.C. area. You didn't hear about it out west. But there was an enormous amount of controversy in the D.C. area where no black workers from America were allowed to work on that project. And the in-your-face aspect of this thing had to do with bringing Chinese workers from China over here to do this. But that falls back into the turnkey part. The turnkey part is that we'll do the whole thing for you. You just pay us, and we'll do the whole thing for you. You don't have to do nothing. And the heck with everything else. The heck with optics. The heck with your Black Progress. The heck with all of these things that you guys sit up on the stages and talk about Dr. King's this and Dr. King's that. And the whole thing that these guys have been talking when you get them on the air, it was content of your character, and Dr. King was a world figure. But you see, when you have jobs just hemorrhaging in America, right,
for all Americans,
right,
and even more so for black and brown communities,
right,
this becomes sort of like reckless, if not negligent, if not reckless behavior.
Well, I subscribe to that wholly. Now they did end up with a black architectural firm. They're McKissick and McKissick are two sisters. I think they're twins. They have their dad was an architect, so they're incredible company. $30 million company. They ended up as the architect. So there was a whole bunch of controversy about that. And so they did ended up with but they didn't start out that way. They ended up with a black architectural firm. But they had. There was a lot of controversy with Roma wanting to be the architectural firm of record and bringing a black architectural firm in. There was a whole another set of controversy associated with the Roma Design Group trying to take over the whole project and kick these guys out because they didn't know what they were. They sensed that they didn't know what they were doing. So there was a whole myriad of little side stories and to allow this thing to end up like it ended up. And so, in my opinion, these guys were looking for a safety net somewhere, and so they just have to fight off all of these comments that you're making about black progress, like employment, like growth, like attentive to Dr. King's principles. They had to take and throw all that stuff out the window. Because it was too hard to do in their world. The way they thought about it, it was too difficult to do. And, of course, I speak truth to power, and if I had kept my mouth shut, all I had to do was to have kept my mouth shut, and I would still be up there working. But, they would probably have gone and made him the sculptor of record, but I'd still be there working with these guys if I had kept my mouth shut.
Okay, we're going to take a break, but when we come back, we're going to talk about what do you think is going to happen, because I know that Maya Angelou has been complaining about or is dissatisfied with one of the quotes, and then you can tell us what work you're doing, what work you'll be doing in the future, okay? So we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll talk about the future with Ed Dwight. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This is the Kathleen Wells Show, and my guest today is Ed Dwight. He has created over 120 memorials, monuments, and public art installations, as well as some 18,000 gallery-level sculptures, and he has also done the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial installed in Denver, Colorado. That's a project you're working on, right?
Oh, no, that was installed a long time ago.
Oh, that was installed. Now,
yeah.
Do you have another one coming up that has also Coretta Scott King?
No, that's installed in Allentown, Pennsylvania. We unveiled it about 5 or 6 months ago.
So you're the perfect person to have done this, right?
Well, you'd assume that. But,
so the question is, why not? And we think it's a controversial question to even ask, right?
Yeah. And you know, this idea of me having sour grapes. I mean, it's an absurd notion because I'm so busy. I got so much other work to do, and I'm not concerned about my legacy because I didn't want anything out of this thing other than to see a wonderful Dr. King Memorial in the mall. That's the only driving inspiration I had, and I wanted to have Dr. King honored properly. That's the only problem I had. I wanted him to be honored properly, and he was not honored properly in this operation.
No, I tend to agree with you on that. I don't like the statue. As I mentioned before, I think it has a feel of Chairman Mao. I think it's inappropriate.
Yes.
And Dr. Martin Luther King means a lot to all Americans, no matter what their color.
Exactly. My attitude about it is that Lincoln looks like Lincoln, Jefferson looks like Jefferson, Roosevelt looks like Roosevelt. He's in their neighborhood. He should look like him. Dr. King should look like Dr. King. Okay, that's where I'm coming down on the process. And then the stuff about the Interior Department has already taken steps, and they've ordered the Park Service to change that quote because again the controversy. They said that Maya Angelou was involved in picking those quotes. Maya Angelou was never in Washington, D.C., and was never involved in picking those quotes because I was there. But yet and still they said that. And then when she went to view the sculpture and looked at the quotes and stuff like that, and they took everything out of context, it was just totally ridiculous the way they, did this thing. And it had to do only with their arrogance about not listening to people who knew better. It was always a slick, easy way to get to where they needed to go, and that's my singular criticism of this thing. This thing should have been put in hands with great care, who were listening to the voices of Dr. King, to look at what we were about as Black Americans and look at the struggle. We'll never, ever, ever get an opportunity like this again.
Never.
There are no Dr. Kings in the wings waiting to be memorialized. And we blew it, in my opinion. We just blew it. And it's not sour grapes. It's a fact.
And, I tend to agree with you. Can it be rectified in any way, you think?
Well, there's a move afoot, and I'm allowing them to do that because if I get involved in that, then it does sound a lot like sour grapes. But, no, there's a group of people, seriously, that want it taken down. And they're going to congressional appeals are going to be put together, and protests and all that kind of stuff are going to be put together, and I'm allowing them to do that. And the fact that I would maybe fall heir to it by saying, well, let's have Ed Dwight do it. I don't care about that. What's more important is that they get a Dr. King memorial up there that looks like Dr. King, because people go there that didn't know him think that's what he was. And he said, that's not him. He was not a confrontational man. He was a man of the cloth. It was soft. In my book, I outline this more in better language than I'm doing right now. But my book is going to be coming out here before long, as soon as we get all the parts and pieces and the illustrations and all the research that we need to do, because I can't go out there and be liable for things and stuff like that. So, but
now,
I am writing a book about it because people want to know.
Talk to me about this book.
Yeah, well, people want to know. Everywhere I go, people are asking what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Why didn't this happen? Why didn't that? Black people and white people.
Mm-hmm.
My emails, all the stuff that I get have to do with, no matter where I go, making public appearances and stuff, what happened. Mm-hmm. So I decided to sit down and write about it and allow people to know what was wrong. Obama says a teaching moment. What was wrong with how this thing was done, and to let us have a lesson here that, you know, we can do better than this, and we need to respect each other in the black community and have more reverence for each other in the black community, above all, to help each other in the black community.
Oh, definitely.
You know,
I second that.
Yeah, you know, and we haven't been doing that.
We haven't been doing that. Because we are talking about a black fraternity, Phi Alpha Phi, outsourcing the Martin Luther King statue to China.
Right.
That's what we're talking about. That's the bottom line. When jobs are hemorrhaging in the black and brown community, and even in the white community, I'm saying, you know, I can take two positions. Either blacks should have done it, or blacks and whites, but definitely Americans.
Right.
That's definitely Americans.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's just an insult. To me, it's an insult to the entire black community. It's a slap in the face to the entire black community.
Yeah.
You know, and to add insult to injury, for me, to have these guys, when the CNN and MSNBC came after these guys about me, they were here with me for a week, by the way, CNN was, you know, and going through my studio, going through all my pictures and all the stuff like that, and to have these guys sit up to the press, get hired guns to lie, that they didn't, first of all, they didn't know who I was, I was trying to intrude on their project, and then they would say the next week that I was with the project, but I got jealous because the project was so successful, so I tried to force myself back into it. And then the next story was that they had hired me to do a bunch of trinkets for them. You know, and it just went story after story, and I have all that stuff recorded. Story after story, you know, telling the public, trivializing, and making me look like a fool. Mm-hmm.
Well, we're coming down to the end of the hour. Give out your email, your website, so people can see your work on the internet.
Yeah, just EdDwight.com.
EdDwight.com. That's easy enough.
Right.
Well, Mr. Dwight, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today. And you know what? I think we're going to do something for Huffington Post. I'm going to post it on Huffington Post. I'll get this interview transcribed or something like that. But I want people to be aware of what has happened, that the Martin Luther King Memorial in Washington, D.C., the project was outsourced to China, and you're not looking at Martin Luther King when you're looking at that statue. You're looking at Chairman Mao. That's my opinion, and I'm sticking to it. So thank you, Dr.
Right.
So thank you, Ed Dwight, for taking the time to speak with me.
You bet. Thanks, Kathleen.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks. You've listened to the Kathleen Wells Show. We'll be back next week, and I'll have some more stimulating talk. Have you heard that before? Okay, thank you. Bye.